not to submit them. I felt that with the evidence that I had with Mr. McIntyre being placed in the front seat of the car and other evidence, it would have helped, but I don't think it would have hurt the case because they don't. So it's such DNA, so it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to come back to anybody at all. And I felt with the other evidence I had, it wouldn't change anything.
So are you saying that, let's just say hypothetically one of these swabs would have came back to a different individual, that if it was swabbed inside the car in the front passenger seat, if it would have came back to a different individual, not Taymor McIntyre, would that have changed your conclusions on this case?
No, sir.
Would it still be that your conclusions are that Taymor McIntyre shot and killed Mark Saldivar with a deadly weapon on
Yes, there was
April 23rd, 2017?
Yes, there was more evidence to support that conclusion.
Now, Ms. Sonnell had been in here earlier to testify about latent prints, and she identified Jalen Bell's fingerprints or latent prints on the cell phone of Mark Saldivar, which I believe you testified to earlier, and also that Jeremiah Rodriguez latent prints were found on the exterior of the vehicle. And she also testified that she tested them against Mark Saldivar, Joanna Reyes, and Taymor McIntyre. You know, in this situation, I guess my question is that Joanna Reyes admitted to being in this vehicle, but yet none of her fingerprints were found. Is that common in cases through your experiences?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So the phone is another good example. It was the victim's phone. He used it. It's his phone, and even his fingerprints weren't found on there, which is kind of like the swabs and like in my decision not to submit, because it's not always a guarantee that anything's going to come back to it. But the fingerprints did come back to Mr. Bell.
Thank you. And again, you know, Mark Saldivar, like you said, it was his phone, but from all intents and purposes, from your investigation, Mark Saldivar was on that hood of that vehicle, and many people testified that he was grabbing onto that vehicle, but yet none of his fingerprints were found.
Correct.
And also, there's testimony that Taymor McIntyre was in that vehicle. However, his fingerprints were not found anywhere in that vehicle also. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And through your investigation, you determined that the death of Mark Anthony Saldivar was caused by Taymor McIntyre while he was trying to commit robbery of Mark Saldivar.
Action leading.
Sustained.
What? Instruct the jury to disregard the question.
Ladies and gentlemen, you to disregard the last question
Motion for disregard.
tonight.
What are your conclusions after the totality of your investigation on your belief of Taymor McIntyre's actions that day?
Objection calls for opinion on the ultimate question.
Sustained.
No, you can't.
Objection.
You can't
You
answer.
got a lot.
Were there also clothing items contained within that car that were related to Taymor McIntyre?
Yes, sir.
And so, including evidence of the letter and the phone obtained from that vehicle, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. We'll pass the witness.
Defense.
Good afternoon, Detective. How are you?
Very good, sir.
I'm sorry,
It's okay.
So, fair to say, there are a lot of moving parts in an investigation like this, right?
Yes, sir.
And you rely on a lot of other people to do some of this granular, fine detail work, like fingerprint examination, extraction of cell phone data, collecting evidence at the crime scene, interviewing witnesses, et cetera, right?
Yes, sir.
You could not possibly do all of that as one person.
No, sir.
But of course, when you're delegating that many responsibilities, you're dependent on those people doing their jobs correctly, right?
Yes, sir.
You have to trust that when they report back to you something, that their conclusions and that their opinions are something you can rely upon, right?
Correct.
There's always human error, though, in every case, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, I want to talk about, in terms of how this investigation developed, would it be fair to say that there's the physical evidence and then there's what people told you, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's talk about the physical evidence for a second. You know from physical evidence that Mark Saldivar is dead, right?
Correct.
And that he died from a gunshot wound.
Correct.
You know that there was a 9mm shell casing found next to his body.
Yes, sir.
You also know that there are shell casings all over the streets of San Antonio for all sorts of different reasons, right?
Yes, but there was a body next to this one.
Understood. But what I'm asking is, the examination that was done in this case never told you that that shell casing is definitively the shell casing that produced the bullet that killed Mr. Saldivar, right?
So I have video evidence and witness evidence that a shot.
And we're gonna get to that in a moment.
Yes, sir.
I don't wanna jump ahead. I'm just
Okay.
saying, as far as that 9mm shell casing is concerned, obviously, it's a shell casing next to the deceased person. You're investigating that man's death. I understand that. I'm just saying, there's nothing that conclusively says that 9mm shell casing produced the bullet that killed him. It just is strongly coincidental, right?
That's a little more than a coincidence, sir, yeah.
Okay, but you know that definitively, it may not be the shell casing.
It's more than likely to be the shell case.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
I'll more than likely, understood. So you found a 9mm shell casing next to this man's body in the parking lot of the Chick-Fil-A, correct?
Yes, sir.
You acquired surveillance footage of this incident, right?
Yes, sir.
And that surveillance footage showed a car pulling into the Chick-fil-A, a man standing on top of the vehicle, and then someone shooting him, right?
Yes, sir.
And you knew from that generally that you're looking for a small, dark-colored four-door sedan, right?
Yes, sir.
And you put a be on the lookout for that vehicle.
Correct?
And you knew that there would be extensive damage to the front windshield of that car, right?
Yes, sir.
And you then, a few days later, acquire more physical evidence in the case at the parking lot of this Mexican food restaurant, right?
Yes, sir.
And so you know that you have a damaged SD card found in the parking lot, right?
Yes, sir.
And you found that subject vehicle. You found a black four-door Kia with a lot of damage to the front windshield.
Yes, sir.
And you found various items, some of which may have belonged to people in the car, some of which may not have belonged to people in the car, scattered around that parking lot, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You did not find a digital camera, correct?
Correct.
You didn't find any, well, you didn't find a digital camera, correct?
Correct.
You acquired surveillance footage from that Mexican food restaurant, right?
Yes, sir.
And so you see individuals getting out of that black four-door Kia on the date in question.
Yes, sir.
And so as far as your physical evidence is concerned, right, that's sort of the universe of physical evidence that you have at your disposal, correct?
Yes, sir.
I mean, you have gunshot residue on the deceased's hand, correct?
Yes, sir.
You later on acquire a 9mm pistol obtained from Jalen Bell in Dallas, right?
Yes, sir.
You do comparison to that, and your analyst tells you that that's not the gun, correct?
Yes, sir.
You don't have any other weapons recovered from the vehicle or any other crime scene.
No, sir.
You do have multiple magazines, right?
Yes, sir. 3 magazines. Yes, sir.
Some are .380 auto and some are 9mm.
Correct.
You don't have any fingerprints on those magazines.
No, sir.
Okay. You have a fingerprint belonging to Jalen Bell on the cell phone that you found tossed out of the car in the Chick-fil-A, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You have, and you spoke to, well, before I get into what you spoke to, you did an extraction of a blue iPhone in the vehicle, that you found in the vehicle, right?
Yes, sir.
You believe that that phone belongs to Taymor McIntyre, correct?
Based on the data on it, yes, sir.
And you found some belongings of Mr. McIntyre's in a gym bag, right?
Yes, sir.
You found a piece of mail addressed to Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You know that that vehicle is registered to Joanna Reyes' father, I believe?
Yes, Juan Reyes.
And you have fingerprints of both Mr. Bell and Mr. Jeremiah Rodriguez that were found in the car, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In terms of physical evidence, are there significant things that I'm leaving out of that recitation?
No, sir.
Okay. So, if we just look at the physical evidence of the case, you know that the case involves a four-door black Kia, right?
Yes, sir.
The case involves a dead man, Mark Saldivar. The case involves, I'm sorry, you were going to say something.
No, yes, sir. I was going to agree, so.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. You know that the case involves a 9mm shell casing, correct?
Yes, sir.
I did forget one thing. When the car was searched, a live .380 auto round was found in the front passenger seat of the car, correct?
That's correct.
You found a condom in the car as well, correct?
Yes, sir, under the front passenger seat.
So, you know that someone was shot, and you know generally where they were shot. And
Yes,
you know
sir.
that they were on top of the car when they were shot, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The physical evidence doesn't tell you who shot, correct?
No, sir.
The physical evidence doesn't tell you who was in the front seat and who was in the back seat, right? Let me back up, because I think I know why you're thinking. You obviously do have the footage from El Casino that shows people getting out of the car, right?
Correct.
Okay. But you can't look at those images on the footage and say, oh, that's Taymor McIntyre, that's Jalen Bell. Like, you just, without any other information you've learned in the case, right?
Well, yeah, without any information that I do have.
Without people telling you, that's me, that's them, you wouldn't be able to say from looking at that footage, who's who.
So, yes, the footage isn't clear enough, but I do have that information.
And we'll get to that
Okay.
in a moment. I'm just trying to take stock
Yes.
of what you've acquired physically.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you don't know whether that black four-door Kia went directly to that Mexican food restaurant after it left the Chick-fil-A parking lot, right?
That's what I was told, that it went directly there, sir. So that's what I have to go by that.
I'm just asking, does the physical evidence tell you whether the Chick-fil-A parking lot, whether that car went from the Chick-fil-A parking lot directly to El Casino
No, sir.
restaurant? So the physical evidence could be consistent with that, and it could be consistent with them making a pit stop someplace, stopping some other location, right?
Yes, sir.
They could have had a Chinese fire drill and everybody changed their seats. The physical evidence wouldn't tell you one way or the other.
No, sir.
Okay. The physical evidence doesn't tell you which gun was used to shoot Mark Saldivar, right?
No, sir.
The physical evidence doesn't tell you what was stolen from Mr. Saldivar, correct?
So the physical evidence includes the video, a backpack was taken, and Mr. Bell was seen still in a backpack.
Okay. So you see Mr. Bell in the video putting on a backpack,
Yes,
correct?
sir.
But let me ask you this, there's no footage of Mr. Saldivar getting in the car with the backpack.
That's
correct?
right.
And so, in terms of just what the physical evidence shows us, you see a man putting on a backpack.
Yes, sir.
That does not tell you that the backpack was stolen, right?
By itself, no, sir.
Okay. So, suffice it to say, despite the fact that there's a lot of physical evidence collected in this case, there's still a lot of unanswered questions from just the physical evidence, right?
Yes, sir.
It was necessary for you to talk to people who might have firsthand knowledge of things in order to better develop your investigation, correct?
Yes, sir.
And some of those people that you spoke to were innocent bystanders around the Chick-Fil-A on that day, right?
Correct.
And they gave you accounts that were consistent about some things, right?
Yes, sir.
Like, for example, they saw that there was something going on unusual in that car before it pulled into the Chick-fil-A parking lot, right?
Yes, sir.
Some people said that they were playing around, some people said they were fighting. You know there are differing accounts about that.
Yes, sir.
Some people describe the people in the car as all Hispanic, some people describe the people in the car as being African American, right?
Yes, sir.
Some people said the African American in the front seat had an afro with a blonde streak in it. Some people said he had short cropped hair.
Yes, sir.
So a lot of people got a general idea of what happened, but I mean, is in your training and experience that pretty par for the course for innocent bystanders watching something like this happen?
Yeah, people on a Sunday afternoon minding their own business and something like that happens, they have different perspectives of it
So it gives you
and impressions.
a rough sketch of what happened, but not like the kind of detail you need as a detective to really drill it home.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then, so if we take the physical evidence plus the innocent bystanders, there's still a lot of things that you don't know
Yes, sir.
from that information, correct?
Yes, sir.
Like, we still don't know why they were playing around or fighting in the car.
Correct.
We still don't know who was in which relative seat in the car.
Yes, sir.
We still don't know who shot the gun.
Yes, sir.
We still don't know which gun it was.
Okay, by name, you're right. Yes, sir.
Okay? We still don't know which gun it was.
Yes, sir.
Accounts also differ about how the gun is used from those innocent bystanders.
Mhm.
You'd agree, right?
How, sir?
Well, you recall some of the witnesses told investigators that the gun was pointing up,
Yes, sir.
and some investigators said the gun was pointed at
Yes,
the
sir.
deceased, and some people said that the gun was being used as a bludgeoning instrument,
Yes, sir.
and some people said that the gun was in a different hand, and that the blows were coming with just a closed fist.
Yes, sir.
So we still don't know exactly how the fight unfolded in the car, right?
No, sir. Just everybody's perspective of what they saw.
Right, and there's no real way for you to weigh one or the other, right?
No, I just put all of their input into the investigation.
Understood. The accounts differ as to how many shots were fired, right?
Yes, sir.
I think we have some people that say one, some people that say two, some people that say three.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, you've got a general idea of what's going on, and you have some physical evidence that does give you a sense of who was in the car. But you'd agree with me that without someone talking to you about what happened inside of that car, you wouldn't be able to file a capital murder charge on anybody, right?
Oh, yeah, because I don't have names.
Well, sure, you don't have names, for one, right? Sometimes when people die in a gunshot-related incident, it's murder, right?
Yes, sir.
Sometimes when people die in a gunshot-related incident, it's self-defense.
Yes.
Defense of property could be a reason someone takes another life with a gun, right?
Yes, sir.
So those things are things, defending a third person could be a reason to take another life with a gun, right?
Yes, sir.
Those are all things that without input from people who were there, you don't have enough information to rule those things out, right?
Correct.
Okay. So that leads us to Joanna Reyes and Jeremiah Rodriguez, right?
Yes, sir.
These are people that you were able to interview.
Yes.
And from their interviews, you learned that, I mean, they're the ones that tell you that Mr. McIntyre was the one who produced the pistol, right?
Yes, where he was seated and that he produced the pistol. Yes, sir.
Okay, so they give you the seating arrangement in the car, and they give you that he's the one who brandished the firearm, correct?
Correct.
they're the ones that tell you that he's the one who shot Mr. Saldivar, correct?
Correct,
They're the ones that tell you that he's the one who started the fight, correct?
correct.
They're the ones who explain why Mark Saldivar was in the car, right?
Yes, sir.
They're the ones that explain, I mean, they just give you their opinion it wasn't self-defense, right? They helped you rule that out.
I mean, I asked them the question and they answered that they didn't believe it was self-defense.
Okay, so when you go into an investigation, it's important not to have a preconceived idea about who's responsible and what happened, right?
Yes, sir.
That's the way we make mistakes, is by having the idea of what happened and so buried in our head that we ignore other things that might tell us something else, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, going into this, based upon the physical evidence, you understand that any one of those four people in the car could potentially have been the shooter.
It was the front seat passenger.
Okay, well, I mean, what I'm getting at is, the physical evidence we just talked about doesn't tell you who was the front seat passenger, right? We agreed on that much.
Yes, but I don't look at, you're breaking it down and I didn't look at it just broken down.
Okay, well, when you're not looking at it just broken down, the missing piece of your puzzle comes from Joanna Reyes and Jeremiah Rodriguez, right?
Yes, sir.
Their information is the only information that you get in this investigation that tells you about the goings-on inside the car, correct?
That's not the way the investigation goes, because I combined all the elements that you explained to come to the conclusion that Mr. McIntyre shot and killed Mr. Saldivar.
Okay, well, I mean, if I mix flour and water together, I'm never gonna get a porterhouse steak, am I?
Your Honor, I would object to argumentative.
Sustained.
If the evidence by itself doesn't tell you a specific fact, then I guess what you're suggesting is that what they've told you is corroborative, and that's why you can add the physical evidence back into this and reach
So-
the conclusion?
So the physical evidence is still a part of it. It's still part of the case. I have the independent witnesses that, yes, they did have differing views and perspectives, but generally, gave a summary of the events that they saw. They don't know who's in the car, they don't know what's happening, but they also don't have any reason not to be truthful.
Okay, but
And-
we acknowledge that those individual people, while they give similar accounts, have big differences, right? The race of the people in the car is a significant difference.
Yes,
You
sir.
agree?
Yes, they do.
The number of shots fired is a significant difference, right?
Yes, sir, but that's normal.
Well, and of course it's normal. I mean, I get that. What I'm asking is, look, okay. Let's say that hypothetically, you're investigating someone who posts videos of them giving a talk on some subject matter in their living room, and you're investigating them for a crime. And someone comes forward and says, they committed a crime, and I know that because this man in his house has a marble mantelpiece and a cuckoo clock and green walls and everything else. And you look at that, and everything that person told you is something they could have gotten from watching his videos online, right? Would that be corroborative of what they're accusing him of?
No. Are you saying like, would that suffice?
Right,
No.
okay. Because everything they're telling you is something that they could have known independently, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, in this situation, Joanna Reyes and Jeremiah Rodriguez told you that the decision to rob was made by Taymor McIntyre in the moment, right?
Yes, sir.
And they denied having anything to do with it, correct?
Yes, sir.
They were totally surprised that this had occurred.
Correct.
And then they talk about things that they saw and observed in the car, right?
Yes, sir.
But many of those things either are just things that are in the car, or they're things that you can't know one way or the other, you have to take their word. Is that a
Correct.
way to describe it?
No,
Okay, so, as an homicide detective, fair to say, almost none of the people that you ever think about as potential suspects in a murder case want to put themselves closer to the crime that you're investigating, right?
correct.
Like, unless they're coming in and say, I confess I did it, right?
Yes,
Some people do, just
Yeah.
confess.
yes,
But unless they're gonna confess, people are typically trying to minimize their involvement in the offense, correct?
yes, sir.
And as a detective, you're trained to pick up on the fact that suspects frequently minimize their involvement, right?
Yes, sir.
And there are lots of ways to minimize involvement, correct?
Yes, sir.
One of which is to point the blame at someone else, right?
Yes, sir.
One of which is to give you what they think you want to hear, right?
People do that, yes, sir.
They're trying to figure that out. It's a cat and mouse game, right?
Yes, sir.
And you're supposed to be watching out for those things.
Yes, sir.
And you're also trying to assess whether or not what this person's telling you can be independently corroborated, right?
Correct.
Because that's the key in case someone has lied to you so badly that they're not credible, right?
Correct.
You have to think not just in terms of what you're gonna ultimately decide, you have to think about how this will be presented and explained to 12
Yes.
people one day.
Yes, sir.
And so, keeping those things in mind, if somebody lies to you for a significant portion of your interrogation of them, that's gonna send off some red flags for you, right?
Yes, but people generally don't start by telling me the truth.
Okay, fair. But people generally either come clean shortly thereafter, or you're going to write off what the rest of they say is also potentially false, right?
Unless I can support it somehow with other evidence.
Okay, fair enough. So Jeremiah Rodriguez lied to you for a significant portion of your interrogation of him on both occasions, wouldn't you agree?
More on the first one. Yes.
Definitely more on the first
Yes.
one. Like for, what, almost half the interview?
Yes, sir.
He told you he wasn't in the car that day.
Correct.
He said he was watching Redbox videos with his siblings at home, right?
Yes, sir.
He indicated he didn't even see these people that day.
Yes, sir.
And he persisted in that for a very long time.
Correct.
And then even after he gave up that he actually was in the car, for the rest of the interview, he told you there was another person in the car.
Correct.
His name was John, right?
That's correct.
And he just, that John was sitting in somebody's lap, right?
Correct.
Okay? Jeremiah Rodriguez, you mentioned earlier that you requested the generation of SID or SID numbers for Jalen Bell and Taymor McIntyre, right?
Yes, sir.
Meaning you intended to charge them with capital murder.
Correct.
And when I say charge, I mean, you're going to present this information to the DA's office, you're gonna apply for an arrest warrant, you know, that process.
Yes, sir.
You did not do that for Jeremiah Rodriguez,
Yes, sir.
despite the fact that he lied to you for at least an hour in total.
I didn't feel there was enough for capital murder
Based upon what he told you.
on Jeremiah. Yes, sir.
Okay. Joanna told you that Jeremiah had a gun, right?
Yes, sir.
That Jeremiah was a drug dealer,
Yes, sir.
that Jeremiah had photography equipment, right?
That he had photography equipment?
You don't recall that?
No, sir.
Okay. Would it surprise you if that was something that was discussed in there?
No, I mean, I believe you.
Okay. Joanna Reyes was avoiding talking to you for months before finally you got to speak with her, right?
That's correct.
And you only got to speak with her because she was arrested out of county.
That's correct.
And she was arrested in Odessa, right?
Yes, sir.
A long way from home.
Yes, sir.
And she also was trying emphatically to suggest that she didn't know anything about this, that it just happened, right?
Yes, sir.
She told you for a lengthy period of time that she wasn't even in communication with Mark Saldivar, right?
Yes, sir. They had communicated. It's been like over a year or something
And that Taymor McIntyre was using her phone to communicate with him.
Yes, sir.
She eventually admitted that wasn't true, right?
Yes, sir.
So she was similarly trying to minimize her involvement.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And
So, you didn't ask Joanna Reyes for her phone in that interview, did you?
No, I didn't, sir.
And Joanna Reyes in that interview never told you that someone else broke that phone?
No, sir.
Okay. Yeah, it's good practice to try and get the phones of people involved in homicide or this, at least witnesses this close to the action in
Yes,
homicide,
sir.
right? For all sorts of reasons, correct?
Correct.
In particular, in this case, what people knew, what was said to them is important, correct?
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, if things are as Joanna portrays it, then, well, I'll withdraw that question. One moment. You were asked some questions, and there was an objection, so I don't want to go into the substance of it either. But you were asked some questions at one point about information that you received from someone other than Jeremiah and Joanna. I'm just going to ask you, did you receive a Crime Stoppers tip in this case?
Yes, sir.
And fair to say, you later learned that Crime Stoppers tip was from someone who was one of Jeremiah's friends, right?
Yes, sir.
So I gather the thought crossed your mind that Jeremiah was trying to feed law enforcement information through the Crime Stoppers tip.
I didn't think that, no, sir.
Okay. It didn't strike you as unusual that a Crime Stoppers tip came in that eventually would be traced back to someone very close to Jeremiah Rodriguez?
It was an anonymous tip. It's a Crime Stopper tip, so I have to work and develop them. It's not trying to determine if so you're trying to say if it's false, but
Well,
I,
let me ask you.
because I could corroborate details of the Crime Stopper tip. So things that mentioned in the Crime Stopper tip, I already knew.
Okay, well, let me back up. If somebody wants to try and sell you on a particular version of the story, and they encourage other people to go in and corroborate their version of the story through an anonymous tip, then that isn't really corroboration, right?
So, again, sir, I didn't just go with that. I had other evidence, the physical evidence, the witness statements, which still supported what the Crime Stoppers said. And I did still talk to people, and mentioned in the Crime Stoppers said,
Okay,
eventually.
When we talk about the witness statements, we're talking about Joanna Reyes and we're talking
No,
about
no.
Jeremiah Rodriguez, right?
I meant the independent witnesses also, sir.
Who we discussed at length, accounts differ as to what they say, right?
It's what they saw, sir.
Each of them, what they saw, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You don't, because it's an anonymous tip, there's no way for you to understand if the tipper has a motive when you're receiving the information, fair to say?
At that point, no, sir.
Right, but in this case, you did later learn that there might be a motive for that Crime Stoppers.
I didn't believe there was a motive, as you're presenting, no, sir.
Okay. Similarly, like you didn't believe that you needed to walk a warrant for Jeremiah Rodriguez for capital murder.
Correct.
Even though you know that some of the accounts indicate that Jeremiah Rodriguez attacked or hit Mark Saldivar.
Yes, sir.
Okay? And there's at least some account among all these different versions we've discussed where Jeremiah Rodriguez may have been armed, right?
That's correct.
And the physical evidence indicated that there might be at least 3 firearms in that vehicle during the time period that this occurred, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But we didn't walk a charge on Jeremiah Rodriguez.
Correct.
Okay. When Ms. Reyes was interviewed, she originally tried to lead you to believe that she was unaware that anyone had a firearm in the car when they got in that day, right?
Yes, sir.
But later on, you very casually say, what gun did Jan Bell have? And she just says 9mm, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Were you able to look at Joanna Reyes' Instagram account at all?
I didn't know, sir.
Okay, so you took her word for it about how this all went down and what was being arranged.
With the physical and other witness statements, yes, sir.
Okay, what else shows what was being arranged?
Just the contact on the phone from Mark Saldivar with Joanna Reyes, sir.
Okay, you don't have the content of that
No, sir.
communication, right?
No, sir.
You just know they spoke.
Yes, sir.
That would be consistent with her talking to Mark Saldivar, right?
Yes, sir.
We all know that she spoke to Mark Saldivar, right?
She said she did, yes, sir.
Okay, there's nothing that leads us to believe she didn't speak to Mark Saldivar, right?
Correct.
But as to the content of it, nothing corroborates that. right?
That's correct.
Okay. And she's given several different accounts of what exactly they discussed.
Yes, sir.
Okay. When you are investigating, you mentioned, you were asked several questions earlier about search warrants. You recall that questioning?
Yes, sir.
And that's pretty standard because of the Fourth Amendment. You need to get warrants to search certain places that you suspect might be involved in a crime like this.
Yes, sir.
And the information you received from these cooperators was that after the shooting, everyone went back to Jeremiah Rodriguez's house, right?
Correct, sir.
Did you execute a search warrant for Jeremiah Rodriguez's house?
No, I did not, sir.
Okay. Did you execute a search warrant for Joanna Reyes's house?
No, I did not, sir.
Or a search warrant for any other place that they indicated to you they might have stayed in the last 2 weeks?
No, sir.
Okay. You did apply for a search warrant for the phone that you determined belonged to Taymor McIntyre, right?
Yes, sir.
And when you applied for that warrant, you advised that you had reason to believe that Joanne Reyes was a person that Mark Saldivar had corresponded with, correct?
Yes, sir.
And did you review that warrant recently?
No, sir.
Would it refresh your recollection to have the warrant in front of you while I ask you about it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, one moment. Find that for you. That's right, yes. Thank you. All right, Sergeant, I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification as JR1. Do you recognize that?
Yes, sir.
And is that the affidavit for search warrant for the iPhone that we've been discussing?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If you have any questions that you don't recall, please feel free to refresh your recollection of that. So when you all found, and I guess let me back up. In order to get into that phone, you first applied for a search warrant to search that black Kia that was found in the parking lot of the Mexican food restaurant, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then you discovered this phone through that search.
Yes,
right?
sir.
Okay. And in that, and so then you applied for another warrant to gain access to search the phone itself, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, I take that back. In between, you also applied for a warrant to obtain Joanna Reyes's cell phone records, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you had her cell phone records before you applied for the warrant to physically search the contents of the iPhone that was found in the car.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the reason why you were able to get the warrant to obtain Ms. Reyes's phone records was because you had taken Mark's phone that was handed to someone from SAPD at the scene at the Chick-Fil-A, and you had mentioned that you were able to access the notifications that were coming up on the screen, right?
Yeah, they were just popping up on the screen, sir.
And so you were able to call numbers
Yes, sir.
off of that. And looking at that phone and looking at those notifications, you were able to see that he had been corresponding with a phone number that you later determined to be Joanne Reyes's, correct?
Not on the phone. You're talking about through the notifications?
Yes, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. So how did you find out that that number was Joanne Reyes's?
So I, through the phone, through the notifications, I found that it was somebody that appeared to be family members of Mr. Saldivar's. Those are the numbers I reached out to. One of them was his brother. I told them who I was. I went out to the location and I spoke to them, gave them the initial information of what we thought was going on. They identified him. I couldn't give them an identification for Mr. Saldivar. They gave me his number. I applied for a search warrant for his phone records. Once I got his phone records, I looked at the approximate time that Mr. Saldivar was seen leaving the house and when the shooting occurred, and that number came up, and so in researching the number, at that point, back in 2017, you could punch numbers into Facebook, like you just find people by their phone number, and Joanna Reyes' name came up, so
Okay.
through that process.
Understood. So, but let me back up. You did call numbers directly off of Mark's phone, correct?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay, and who did you call directly off of his phone?
There were different people that I spoke to, sir.
Random people that
Yeah,
you
yes,
spoke
sir.
to that day? Okay.
Yes, sir.
And you were able to do that even though you couldn't unlock the phone?
That's correct.
Okay. And you were calling through, was Joanna Reyes' number one of the numbers you called?
No, sir. Not that I spoke to, no, sir.
Well, did you ever call anybody that you didn't get a hold of? Did you ever try to ring Joanne Reyes' number through Mark's phone?
Through Mark's phone, it was locked, sir.
Well, I understand, but you indicated in your reporting that you had Mark's physical phone from the Chick-Fil-A parking lot, right?
Correct, sir.
And as you're trying to figure out who is this man, is this phone, whose phone is this, how is it connected, you indicated that you had called numbers off of the phone.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean I called them through the phone itself. I wrote the numbers down and then called them from the office phone.
Okay, so these would be numbers you wrote down from the search warrant of Mark's phone, or are they numbers you wrote down by
They're-
actually looking at Mark's phone?
Just looking at Mark's phone.
Okay, but you called them from your office number?
Office or my work cell. So, but no, I didn't. Other than the ones that are logged in the prosecution guide, I don't,
So you don't believe you ever called Joanne Reyes' number?
I don't believe I did, no, sir.
You indicated that Joanne Reyes and Mark Saldivar had been in telephonic communication frequent telephonic communication in the hours leading up to his death, right?
I mean, they had been in communication since like midnight the night before.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So fair to say those would have been the most recent numbers
Yes, sir.
in Mr. Saldivar's phone,
Yes, sir.
but you didn't call them?
So no, I didn't call her number. I tried to contact her, and then that's how I ended up finding her.
Okay, you tried to contact her,
Joanna Reyes.
right, how did you find her number? Through the phone, right? But you didn't call that number?
No.
Let me kind of narrow this down. I understand, because we're talking about everything at once, and we're talking about a narrow span of time.
Okay.
I want to focus this questioning on the time period leading up to when you applied for a search warrant for that blue iPhone that was found in the car.
Okay.
Okay? So between the time that you physically acquired Mark Saldivar's phone and the time that you applied for the search warrant for that blue phone that was found in the car, let me just ask you this way. Did you ever believe that that blue phone that was in the car was Joanna Reyes' phone?
I didn't know whose phone it was.
Okay. Did you suspect it was Joanna Reyes' phone?
No, I just didn't know whose phone it was.
Okay. But you had spoken to Joanna Reyes before you unlocked the phone or after?
You're talking about the blue one?
Yes, sir.
After.
Okay. Had you determined whether or not, had you acquired Joanna Reyes' call logs before you applied for the blue phone warrant?
Yes, sir.
Had you called any of the numbers on Joanna Reyes's call?
No, sir.
Okay. In your conversations with Ms. Reyes, she frequently offered up the explanation that she was afraid as a reason why she hadn't spoken out sooner, or why she was in Ector County, all sorts of things, right?
Yes, sir.
And you tried to downplay how much danger she was in, correct?
I mean, that was just what she was saying, yes, sir.
But you were trying to explain that that wasn't as significant of a threat as she perceived it, right?
Well, by the time I spoke to her, Mr. McIntyre was already locked up, and that's who she seemed to be afraid of.
Okay. So that was the reason you were trying to give reassurance that there wasn't significant risk.
I mean, I was trying to reassure her, but she sure felt like there was a significant risk.
In terms of what transpired after she gave you her whole account of things, you explained to her that she would likely be let out on bond, right?
For the warrant sheet, the reason she was there.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Right. That she would be at liberty after your interview. She would be able to walk out of the room. Well, I mean, sorry, that she would be able to post bond and walk out of jail, that there would be an independent reason to hold her.
Yes, I told her I was going to file at large on her for capital murder.
And at large means that you're not going to be immediately arrested just because you filed the case doesn't mean they're going to be immediately arrested, right?
Correct.
Okay. So you said that she appeared to be afraid and concerned when she was talking to you, right?
When she was talking to me,
Yes, sir.
no, she expressed that. She's locked up. Like I think she felt pretty safe there, but she was expressing to me why she felt that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you go out and attempt to corroborate any of the things that she said making her afraid?
No, sir.
Okay. You didn't go and try to conduct an investigation in Dallas where she was, right?
No, sir.
All right. You didn't talk to anybody in Dallas who she might have been living with or staying with?
No, sir.
Okay. And we already said you didn't acquire anything on her phone,
That's correct.
and you didn't even ask for her phone in the interview.
Correct.
You mentioned that you acquired DNA swabbing from the suspects, right?
Like physically from the suspect? Physically from the
Or
suspect?
you requested it
For Mr. McIntyre.
just for Mr. McIntyre?
Yes, sir.
Did you have any DNA swabbing done on Mr. Bell?
No, sir.
Did you have any DNA swabbing done on Joanna Reyes or Jeremiah Rodriguez?
No, sir.
Okay, just Mr. McIntyre?
Yes.
Okay. And you indicated that you never requested that that be processed against anything on any of the items of evidence, right?
Yes, sir.
And your explanation for that was basically you made the decision that you had enough to proceed forward without that information, right?
Through the course of the investigation, yes, sir.
So, I mean, you do recognize that that comes with an inherent amount of risk to not check for DNA, correct?
Yes, sir, but like I mentioned, even with The evidence that I had as physical witness and other evidence, as you mentioned, sir, I still believe that all that showed that Ms. McIntyre.
And I understand what you believe, but what I'm trying to get to is, I mean, for example,
Yes, sir.
Jeremiah Rodriguez told you there was another man in the car named John, right?
That's correct.
And that he was sitting in someone's lap while they were driving around, right?
Yes, he did.
And you clearly make manifest to Jeremiah that you're not buying that,
Yes, sir.
right? And then he starts to change his tune, correct?
Yes, sir.
Right? And we've talked about how one of the problems with interrogating people is they are trying to tell you what they think you want to hear, right? And you have to kind of cut them off at the pass.
Yes, sir.
And so, let's say that you ran that serology and you ran that DNA, and it came back to a man in CODIS named John. That'd be a problem, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it would definitely change things from the evidence, physical evidence, video, witness statements that I had to that point, but I didn't have that indication.
You decided that was a low probability event and that you'd take the risk and you'll file the charge and you won't charge Jeremiah.
That's not the reason I didn't charge him, but no, that's, like I said, I was basing it on all the evidence, the totality.
Bottom
of the
line
evidence
is
I
we
had.
just don't know what that DNA evidence would tell us.
It wasn't submitted, no, sir.
Okay. In terms of processing the automobile, there wasn't any work done to try and identify whether or not there was blood spatter in the car, for example.
That's, that's CSI's job, sir. I don't know that, I didn't get any evidence or indication from CSI that blood spatter or any other biological fluid was found in the car, no, sir.
Okay, so the thoroughness of their investigation is one of those things we talked about at the beginning, where there are a lot of moving parts, you have to rely on their work, you have to trust it was competently done, right?
Yes, sir.
But if there had been blood spatter in the car, you'd want to know about it, right?
Yes, sir.
And you'd want to run serology on it, right?
But it wasn't found, sir.
Okay, and you don't know why it wasn't found. You can't say whether it wasn't found because it wasn't there or
That's,
CSI didn't do
I
their
mean, that's what I
job.
choose to say, it wasn't there. Yes, sir.
Okay. As far as you're aware,
As far as I'm aware,
it
yes, sir.
wasn't there.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Going back real quick to the issue of her fear and Joanna's fear, right? One of the things that you point out to Joanna in that interview that I'd like to ask you about is, Taymor and Jalen Bell obviously leave town. Taymor's found in New Jersey, Mr. Bell's found in Dallas, right?
Yes, sir.
And your understanding from talking to Ms. Reyes is that she went to Dallas and then she went to Ector County.
Yes, sir.
Maybe somewhere else we don't know.
Yes, sir.
No one was keeping tabs on Jeremiah in San Antonio as far as you know, right?
As far as I know now, sir.
Okay. And you even asked her, well, if you're so worried about this, why would they just leave Jeremiah by himself?
Yes, sir.
Asking that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I want to ask you a couple questions about that SD card that was found in the parking lot.
Yes, sir.
You said that you tried to access it just by plugging it into a computer like you would any SD card, right?
Yes, sir.
And it just wasn't working.
Correct.
So you sent it off, you said for analysis. Can you just explain for us a little bit what exactly, who did you send it to?
So I sent it to, San Antonio Police Department has a video investigation technical unit. They're the ones that generally collect surveillance video. You know, they help us out recovering photos, sometimes from SD cards, not just on criminal cases, on other stuff. They help CSIs out with that. So that's kind of what they do. They're detectives.
Okay, and you sent it to them and they said, we can't get it to work, we can't do anything.
Correct.
And was there any follow-up after that? Are there any additional steps that could have been taken to try and restore that SD card?
They're the subject matter experts, sir. They didn't indicate that there was anything else that could be done, no, sir. So
Okay.
I would say no.
You deferred to their experience?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, I mean, as far as the SD card is concerned, you don't know if it's a random SD card that someone else dropped in the parking lot, or if it belonged to the deceased, or if it belonged to someone else?
That's correct.
Okay. Did they generate any kind of a report to you?
Yes, they did. I'm pretty sure they did.
Okay. When do you think, as far as you were concerned, your interview with Ms. Reyes is in September of 2017, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And then your interview with Mr. Rodriguez is in a similar time frame, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then you file the case with the DA's office, right?
Yes, sir. Before, yes, sir.
Let's talk a little bit about what your duties are as the detective on a case, the lead detective on a case, after you've taken that step of filing the charge with the DA's office.
Yes, sir.
Do you go back to sort of being eligible to catch other cases and to be reassigned to other work at that point? Or is it something where you file charges and you are frequently still heavily involved in the investigation? It's just that you completed step one, which is I have enough to file a charge.
So the case is filed and we are still subject to receiving other cases.
Okay.
We have a caseload.
So you're sort of back to the normal routine, or, I mean, how many cases are you expected on a daily basis to be worrying about?
It varies, sir. Anywhere from half a dozen to more, yeah.
Okay. So during this time period from April of 2017 until you filed the charges on it, this wasn't the only case that you're working on?